Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I just finished watching the Christmas special of Doctor Who: The Church on Ruby Road. And yes, I did watch this quite late because I had zero intentions of ruining my Christmas day with my loved ones by watching an episode that I knew that we were not going to enjoy, but I still intended on watching it even if it's a few days late to have informed criticism of the Shudigawa era and Russell T Davies' second era as a whole before stopping watching the show. I will not be watching any of the upcoming series from Shudigawa unless enough of my audience substantially wants me to do so, because I'm just not interested in it anymore. It's not Doctor Who. It hasn't been for a long time, ever since the Timeless Children and Jodie Whittaker's era summarily destroyed the canon of the franchise, and Russell T Davies made it clear in the 60th anniversaries that he had no intentions of repairing it, but doubling down and worsening the damage with stuff like bi-regeneration. This isn't Doctor Who anymore, and every single interview done by Millie Gibson, Shudigawa, and Russell T Davies confirmed the fact that this is Doctor Who in name only. The change from sci-fi to fantasy, the change in character, the change of the resetting this as a new regeneration cycle, not burdened by the psychological damage of the previous Doctor. This is not Doctor Who anymore. It's not bound by the same rules, and it's just physically not the same show anymore. So why should I be interested in something that is not what it was supposed to be, not what it has been for 60 years? So why am I going to review it? They're even resetting it with Series 1, with 2023 being the beginning of this new franchise for the most part. And I'm not interested in that. If you are, more power to you. This just isn't the same Doctor Who. This isn't Doctor Who in the least. And if you're enjoying it, have fun with it. It's not something that I'm interested in, something that I have no intentions of reviewing further. But in my thoughts on The Church of Ruby Road, a lot of the transitions were very clunky between scenes, and the writing was abysmal. A lot of the character development was quite awfully done. There were a few moments of Ruby that I did enjoy, specifically the moment of hesitation that she had before grabbing on to the ladder leading up to the goblin ship. I enjoyed that. She was still going to do what needed to be done, but she hesitated because she was afraid. There was a little bit of something there, but that's about the most that I can praise this episode for. And Shudigawa just isn't a good actor, in my opinion, or at least not good in the role, because he deadpans his way through the majority of scenes, and when he isn't deadpanning, he's going so over the top that it seems like a caricature of a performance rather than a performance in and of itself. Of course, there were no Doctor moments throughout the episode, nothing that made me think this is the Doctor, this is the character that I've come to know and love over many years. He just behaved completely differently. His motivations were completely different, and it's just not the same character, written wise or performance wise. So again, I'm not interested in it. The whole stuff with the goblins and the change from fantasy from sci-fi is a strange one that was very poorly depicted because everything didn't make sense. Slight spoilers for the end of the episode, but they don't explain how the goblins are able to time travel. They don't explain why killing the king goblin would eradicate the goblins from the timeline. And then, of course, there's all the coincidences of the baby surviving a fall from the top of a tower. And no, his gloves did not save it because the gloves were out of power by that point and broken. And he caught the baby with his arms, not with the gloves. So even if the gloves were functional, the baby should have died. And then, of course, a moment later, that's when the little bassinet the baby was in fully vanished. So why didn't that disappear with everything else that the goblins possessed? Why was it strategic timing, perhaps? It was never explained. Of course, nothing in this episode was explained beyond the fact that, ooh, coincidences. The goblins like coincidences. So if anything doesn't make sense, anything's a plot hole, or anything seems way too contrived, that's written into the story. So if we wrote this episode poorly, it was on purpose. No, it was just a cheap excuse to get away with the fact that it didn't make any sense whatsoever. And I fully predict that perspective to continue into the subsequent series. If anything doesn't make sense, if a coincidence is too over the top, if there's contrivances, well, the goblins are still influencing the companion and the Doctor. Oh, yay, so shut up. No criticism is allowed because it's all part of the canon now. I'm fully expecting that, but it doesn't make sense. The actual plot of The Church of Ruby Road doesn't make a lick of sense, even within the internal logic of this episode. It's just nonsense spewed forth on the screen with, ooh, it's on purpose because coincidences is magic now. Yeah, that's what we got. And then, of course, there's that weird stuff with the neighbor of Ruby at the very end of the episode breaking the fourth wall to say, oh, you've never seen a TARDIS before? But earlier she didn't recognize the police box, so maybe she's familiar with TARDISes, but not necessarily the Doctor's TARDIS looking like a police box. Who knows? Some people have speculated online that that's the Ronnie. I don't predict that to be the case because Russell T Davies has made it very clear that he wants to diverge entirely from the show that has come before. And I don't foresee him bringing back many villains, many characters whatsoever from either Classic Who or New Who, which ended in 2017 for me and most other Doctor Who fans. But those are my thoughts on Church of Ruby Road. I will be going on some live streams to talk more in depth about the Church of Ruby Road, but that is where a lot of my thoughts on the episode ends. When it comes to the news surrounding it, we have the overnight viewership figures for the Christmas special, and they are a slight improvement over the episode The Giggle, which is a good thing, I guess. Improvement is always something that is looked favorably upon in a business studio side of things like at the BBC, but those still aren't good numbers. They are the lowest Doctor Solo first episodes in the franchise's history and the lowest Christmas special overnight viewings. And that's not good. Again, these figures matter. Of course, the overnight figures matter. Sure, the consolidated might matter slightly more, but the consolidated figures for the last several episodes weren't good enough to justify this massive investment of Disney, the BBC, and Sony Pictures here in America. These numbers aren't good, and there's something strange going on here. So initially, these overnight figures were compared against the consolidated figures, which were those numbers to the far right in the +7 TV +4 screen category. But that second column in between those two didn't exist prior, the +7 TV only numbers, and these numbers are what were reflected on leaks and other sites the moment that the 7-day mark of the 60th anniversary specials had been reached. I heard these numbers floating around like the 6.58 for The Giggle on the Sunday after The Giggle came out. That seems to explain the discrepancy in the numbers that were quite lower. Again, I don't think it's a conspiracy necessarily or something like that, but it is strange that they suddenly decided to differentiate these two numbers and say that there's a middle category. We haven't seen that in Doctor Who in a very long time, if at all, in at least the figures that I'm familiar with. So it is kind of a weird thing to happen. Here's the viewership figures for the Star Beast that I took a screenshot of when they initially came out. So that 7.61 is the full +4 screen number, and that number prior to it, the 7.34, was one that we saw on the Sunday after the Star Beast came out. Kind of weird thing that they've done. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below why they're doing that, but I had to point it out because a lot of people are scrambling to explain this away to justify it. I don't know the reasoning behind making this split. Maybe it's to explain away why everyone was reporting, including legitimate sites, were reporting that the Giggle only got 6.58 million views on its 7-day consolidated, whereas they reported a few days later that it got 6.85. Kind of a weird thing. I don't know why, but it is something that needs to be put out there in front of the audience, in front of my audience. But a few things I wanted to talk about. Apparently, Millie Gibson has said that this new show, this new Doctor Who, which is not connected really at all to the previous shows, is going to attract a lot of Gen Z audience, and there will be many controversial elements. This falls in line with what Shudigatwa said, that there will be a lot of political commentary that support his far left-wing personal politics to a strong degree. That's what we've come to expect. They're even saying it's going to be controversial. Russell T Davies has tons of interviews saying this will be controversial. These people will hate this. Those people will hate that. I still don't understand the whole diehard fans are going to hate the Church of Ruby Road. Don't understand what that comment was about at this current time. Perhaps you can clarify that in the comments below. But they keep saying this is going to be controversial. People aren't going to like this. This is not a way to market a franchise, a new series, especially when you're going on such a staunch reboot, for the most part, of Doctor Who. But attracting Gen Z, yes, that is their target audience. Their target audience are not Doctor Who fans. They're not people who have been supporting the show for 60 years. They are looking for a new audience, and they despise the previous audience to the point where they don't even care to market to them. It's like, yeah, you're not going to like it. You're just not going to like it. That is not a good perspective for long-term success. And it'll start to show way more when we start to get the viewership figures for Shudigatwa's first season. I fully predict that it will drop substantially from the already measly 4.73 overnight figures of Shudigatwa's very first episode, the lowest viewed episode of any new Doctor, including Jodie Whittaker, which was very recent enough to have the same, overnight figures don't matter, everyone's going to watch up in the consolidated excuses. Those excuses still apply to her as much as they do to Shudigatwa, and her first episode figures dwarfed Shudigatwa's by a wide margin. Now, I do need to give Doctor Who TV a little bit of praise for allowing such a guest article to be written on their site. Just want to go over it briefly. This is a guest feature, why Doctor Who is no longer the show that I fell in love with. I'm shocked that this opinion piece that is very critical of the show is allowed on this site. And I agree with a lot of the points put forward into it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it has a lot of great insight into what is currently happening. They broke all the rules, listing the rules. Although the show can dabble in other genres, it is ultimately a science fiction show. Now, Russell T Davies fully intends to break that rule, making it fully a fantasy show rather than a sci-fi show. But there's a lot of other great stuff in this article breaking down why this era and the previous era under Chris Chibnall aren't Doctor Who anymore, and why he's no longer interested in this franchise anymore, similar to why myself and many other diehard Doctor Who fans are no longer interested in it, because it is no longer Doctor Who. That's practically been admitted by Russell T Davies by restarting it, by saying this isn't a sci-fi show anymore. Oh, this will appeal to a new audience. They're admitting it without saying it outright. They're doing everything but saying this isn't the Doctor Who that you know and love anymore. This is a reboot, and it's called Doctor Who in name only, and that's about as much as it shares in common with its predecessor. So I'm done with it unless my audience really wants me to continue into Shudigawa's seasons. I have enough that I can have some informed criticism of Shudigawa as the role of the Doctor and the writing of Russell T Davies, but I have no intentions of going forward because it's not Doctor Who anymore, and they're making that very, very clear with everything that they've said. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon.